And we turn the meeting over to Superintendent.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, many members of the public that are watching or with us, and I believe our news reporter. We appreciate you joining us for this ESSER 3 public meeting this morning. The purpose of the meeting, which Aaron, Michelle, and Shelley will lead, is to share the ESSER 3 process, that is federal funding that comes to us to support initiatives associated with reducing the gap in other pandemic-related items. The exciting part for me before we pass it over is how aligned the ESSER spending and proposed budget is to our strategic plan, which we have been working on since last January, when we conducted our stakeholder interviews, identified our priorities, used evidence-based research strategies, and launched initiatives to support our community learning initiative. Planning the ESSER became quite easy because anything that you see proposed today during this presentation is also aligned with one of our strategic priority goals and initiatives. So in the essence of time, I'll pass it over to our Finance Director, Aaron Sherman, if you have no other questions before we start.
I'll make one comment. We do have 4 board members with us today, Ms. Young, Ms. Shumway, Ms. Weiser, and myself, Roger Jacks.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, members of the board, before we break into ESSER 3, the reason we are here, we'll go through ESSER in general really quick, and then we'll take a look at how the day is going to work out, and we'll talk a little bit about the public input and how that could fit in. So first off, ESSER is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Act. It's commonly referred to as ESSER. It's a federal relief program that came about through the pandemic. For Kingman Unified, it's roughly 23.6 million across 3 funds and 4 years. The first round of ESSER, ESSER 1, has basically been spent. That we got approval in that first year of the pandemic, and we spent that down rather quick. We have an approved grant in ESSER 2, but we are mid-program with that spending. And you'll see in ESSER 3 how lined up ESSER 3 is with ESSER 2 as well as ESSER 1. So though we're in front of you for a public meeting and to go through the items in this budget, nothing is really different than how we've been treating ESSER throughout from 1, 2, and 3. So couple things about ESSER 3 that are different. We've already talked about the need for a public meeting. We're here for that. And it also has a mandatory 20% set aside. That 20% set aside must be dedicated to reducing the learning gap through any means necessary. And that could include meeting the social and emotional needs of students. And so lastly, it's really important to know that once all of these grants are approved, the funds are fluid, just like grants are in our district every year. We have to adopt, we have to revise, we have to change our strategies, sometimes change direction based on how much money we spent, either spending too much in an area or spending too little. So we're always refining these budgets. So anything we see here today is not a guarantee, but it is what we're trying to jump off with. Next slide, please. So really quick, we will go through ESSER 1 and 2, those 2 budgets really fast. We'll take a look at the special requirements for ESSER and speak briefly about ESSA versus ESSER. We'll go through the ESSER 3 20% items. We'll go through each request associated with compensation. And then we'll wrap up with a breakdown of items we expect to ask the state to approve. The board is free to stop and ask questions at any time. And this is really up to you how you want to handle the public meeting. You could ask questions after each item. You could ask questions after several slides. Whatever the board wants to do with the public meeting aspect, you're free to do. And lastly, we do not need specific approval for this plan, but you will see items in here that are new and require new spending. So you would see some of those items at a later board date, most likely December. And I'll address those items when we get to them. So before I jump in, do you have anything you'd like to say or ask that I do?
I would suggest that we go ahead and ask questions as we go.
Okay.
If that works for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this is ESSER 1. This is a breakdown, a real brief breakdown of the spending within ESSER 1. As I said, we've spent the vast majority of this money. So I ask you to take a quick look here, and if you wanted to talk about any of these items, we can. Otherwise, I would move forward. This is just to give you an idea of how we're doing our spending so far. Okay, next one is ESSER 2, and you guys can call back to this anytime you like. ESSER 2, same idea. It goes 2 pages though, and it's 6.7 million. And you're going to see those 2 pages work together with the same thing. We just break down the spending and the items within the budget. And go ahead. Oh, and I'd also like to say on the long-term outlook, I give an idea of where we are currently with that money. Again, we'll take any questions here. And again, we can refer back to these during the presentation. Okay, so we can hop ahead. That's okay. Okay, this is the first piece, the 20% set aside summary. I'm going to turn this small piece over to Michelle Stout, our grants manager.
So the entire award for ESSER 3 is 15.3 million. So the 20% breakout would be 3.063 million of that entire amount. The allowable uses of these funds are very clear and straightforward. They want evidence-based interventions, which are basically programs or practices that have evidence that they have been effective in producing the results and improving outcomes when implemented. It's also summer learning and enrichment in comprehensive out-of-school time programs. So for those, we would need to have an academic achievement component as well as a social and emotional learning component for each. For these categories, what we'll need to report is the total amount allocated versus the total amount expended, how these activities specifically address the social and emotional needs, and the aggregated data for each category. And this is going to be along the academic achievement piece.
So not only do we have to set the 20% aside, we have to ensure that we are tracking it, not only the spending, but the efficacy. So we can't just leave these 20% in a bucket and not readdress and review and look for changes if we need to. So before we get into the items, do you guys have any questions about the 20% set aside? Okay. So item 1, which is part of the set aside, is a social worker. So this is one district social worker during all of the current year and the next 2 years. That's 3 years of salary and benefits, a little bit over $215,000. The social worker collaborates with the attendance interventionist and parent liaison and identifies needs and coordinates necessary resources to work through specific student needs on the ground level. This has that 20% requirement. Michelle can speak to that if she'd like.
So we did find one piece of evidence that came out with a very strong rating as far as when it's implemented in other districts. It works for K-12 as well as urban and rural areas. So it's basically designing an attendance team, and it'll address the barriers and the root causes of not coming to school. And the social worker will be one of those main pieces that'll address the barriers and be able to work with other agencies if they need to prevent students prevent students from attending school.
We asked to keep this funded through ESSER 3 at a minimum. Any questions on that? Okay.
I do have one question.
Okay,
Sorry.
please.
Was it really difficult to get a social worker?
Yes and no, because it is a specialized position, but we've had several applicants. We finished up some interviews and we're in the process of the hiring of those positions. And moving forward, we'll reach out to the Social Workers Association through.
And the reason Shelley is using positions in plural is because in working with Chief DeVries and Dr. Knievel in the M-STEP grant, they are also going to fund a social worker position or counselor position for the district. So we would be able to have two,
Awesome. Good.
an elementary and then a secondary.
Thank you.
I have a question on the ESSER Funds 3. When we look at this item here, it's funding that position for 3 years of salary. Is there any limitations on the ESSER 3 funds that you're aware of as far as how many years out you can use it?
Well, yes, and so when you see that 3 years of salary, we're pushing that out to the end of the ESSER funds to where we cannot use it past that date.
Okay.
Right, and that'll be the same for every request in here is how long within ESSER we ask for you to fund it. Yes, fiscal year 24 is the final year of our ESSER 3.
Is there any discussions there Fed-wise as far as ESSER 4 or any other, or are we going to drop off a cliff?
I feel like there's going to be a cliff.
Okay.
I think it's good. The funding's going to dry up. So if you want the pandemic to end, or as many of us do, then we would expect ESSER to drop off. If the pandemic were to essentially increase and get worse, I guess I would expect to see an ESSER 4 at that point.
Okay, thanks.
We're good? Okay. So part of that team that Michelle spoke of, the next item is the attendance interventionist. These are 10 attendance interventionists at schools across the district for the next 2 years. This current year is already funded in ESSER 2. This is an item the board approved at an earlier date. Really quick, the interventionists collaborate with the social workers and the current attendance staff to track chronic absenteeism while providing interventions to the at-risk students identified. This is focused heavily on reducing the learning gap by honing in on student well-being and accessible learning environments. This is a relatively large influx of manpower at our school levels, right? We've essentially doubled the attendance offices at the schools, and we've doubled our effort up top with a second specialist. And so you see that we are really honing in on attendance and the causes of attendance and the types of interventions we can do to improve the livelihoods of our students in this area.
So are we looking at being able to go and talk to each family directly when we need to?
Yeah, the idea, Beth, is the current attendance clerk that we have had forever is, we'll talk in tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 is typical, comes to school, everything's going along nicely. Tier 2, there seems to be some bumps in the road for the student or the family, and a tier 3 would be highly at risk, rarely at school. There might be some significant barriers. So the traditional attendance clerk takes attendance, calls families, and deals with tier 1 students. The additional attendance interventionist will work with those kids who are absent more than 10% of the time by having small groups, meeting with them at school, building a relationship, working with the families and the teacher, getting them in contact with the parent liaison and so forth, and tracking that attendance. Anybody who doesn't have improved attendance through that then would be referred to the tier 3, which is the truancy officer that we already have. And we're working with Mojave County and probation on truancy court outside of ESSER. So that whole team, the tier 1, tier 2, and 3 attendance folks, the social worker, and the behavior coaches, which you'll see in a minute, will collaborate and have personal relationships and tracking for those chronically absent kiddos.
Good.
Sounds good.
Do you think we need to speak to this on this one?
We might actually learn quite a bit in this process.
We might. Yeah. And for the sake of time, I won't repeat the 20% requirement. It's very similar to the first ones, as
Right.
we're kind of packaging all of this attendance and behavior together. We say attendance because I think it's the easiest and it's like the flagstone, but at the same time, I think it's a behavior. Okay, so behavior coaches, ESSER 3. 12 behavior coaches at schools across the district for the second half of this year. So with, approval, we would look to hire in January, or look to hire before with them starting in January. second half of this year and then the next 2 years through all of ESSER three. That's a $1.2 million price tag. These positions, again, focused on student well-being and equitable and accessible learning environments. The need for our schools to address substantial behavior issues and chronic absenteeism through social and emotional support is clear across our entire district. Again, we'll skip the 20%, but any questions or comment?
What are you looking for in a behavioral coach as far as criteria goes?
That's a good question, Vice President Jacks. It's not a certified position, it's classified because we've already done the research on trying to find certified behavior coaches. They don't exist. So we're looking for someone who has a skill set of relationship building, problem solving. We obviously would like them to have some schooling, but mentor types personality traits where they can build a relationship with the student, push into the classroom, do a little bit of small group mentoring, friendship circles, communicate with families. So, and it will be paid similar to the way 21st century grants are. And Michelle can speak to the kinds of things you look for in like a 21st century coordinator.
So we would definitely want somebody that has a good enough rapport with the entire school community. So that includes parents and students, not just the staff, the teachers and administration. They would be a good linear piece to keep all of those tied together, and then also be able to understand the program well enough to do the reporting. So if, for instance, if we created a SMART goal, they should know how to collect that baseline data as well as how to track throughout the year and see if we're on track 50%, 75% of the way through the year.
Very cool.
So it's kind of like a student advocate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've had,
Right.
It's also on the push in teachers who have disruptive behaviors in their classroom and are not able to attend to academics. The behavior coach can work in small groups with some of those students based on their individual needs, which will allow teachers to do whole group or other kinds of instruction in the classroom without disruption.
That's awesome.
okay, again, this next item, opportunity room interveners. Again, it fits in with attendance and behavior. Asking for 5 opportunity room interveners. This Wallapai, Mount Tipton, Surbat, Manzanita, and Desert Willow for the second half of the current year and for the next 2 years. 5 FTE for about close to $500,000. So the opportunity rooms are what we're calling the ISS rooms. Is that correct? Yep.
Modeling ISS. ESSER's paying for these, but all ISS rooms are going to be remodeled under this category. So go ahead, Ben.
So less about discipline and more about behavior interventions and what was that? Yeah, restorative efforts from the staff and the students. Did you guys want to talk more about that?
No, I
Okay.
understand that.
You see how these all start to fit together?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that was the behavior package, so to speak, of the 20%. The last piece of the 20%, I think, yep, is Friday school interventions and summer school. You guys know what that looks like, right? We want to fund it through ESSER 3. 1, because the funding's there and we need to spend this money down. And 2, because it'll free up funding in other grants, other areas that we spend substantial amounts of money. It'll free that up for other things. And so we're looking at multiple supplemental positions over those 3 years, 22 through 23. I'll guess just 1 year of it, and that'll be $738,000. I think originally I had 2 years budgeted, but I had to do some trimming. But you guys know we're going to do Friday schools, intersessions, and summer regardless of the funding. So this is just where we want to put it in 23. And that fits directly in with the 20%, as Michelle mentioned earlier. So is there anything you guys want to talk about this type of supplemental work? Okay.
So-
Sounds good.
Well, what I am hearing though is that it's okay to use these funds to supplant other.
You are hearing that. Yes, it is. They have made that legal for this.
That's awesome. Yeah.
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 Okay, so now we're into outside of the 20%, which doesn't mean it doesn't meet some of the criteria within the 20%. It just means we haven't tagged it and forced ourselves into a corner on the tracking of it. But you'll see it fits right in with the strategies in the same way. So these are the teachers we request through ESSER 3. We'd like one ELL teacher that rotates around the district during 23 and our second half of the year plus 23 and 24. That's roughly $142,000 in salary and benefits for that. And then we'd also like 7 COLA teachers, 2 primary, 4 secondary, 1 special education for the same time period, and that's around $976,000. It is really important on these COLA teachers to mention those funds will work in conjunction with the ESSER 2 funds. So you could see your district administration playing with the amount of FTEs and how they're dispersed at the elementary and secondary level. But this is where it is right now for budget standpoint.
And currently, I'll just add, and Roger, you're familiar with this, we have teachers of record for online courses. And so this kind of money is spent across the spectrum of teachers that we have in classes right now, because they are the teachers of record and teaching their own classes. This would replace that. So then if you were the ELA COLA teacher, we wouldn't have to ask all the ELA teachers to also be teachers of record. We would have one.
Yep.
So funding wise, it's sort of moving TOR money that we're currently spending into this ESSER 3. And then when ESSER 3 is complete, depending on the enrollment of COLA and the success of COLA, which Liz Albin is doing a tremendous job right now to make successful, we would look and see, does COLA pay for itself? Or do we need to return to the TOR?
That makes sense.
You guys good on this one? Okay.
Yep.
Teachers on assignment. So we're asking for 3 K through 8 teachers on assignment, Desert Willow, KMS, and Serbat. Second half of this year, plus 2 additional years, that's over 500,000. And then 1 9 through 12 teacher on assignment for Lee Williams High School for the second half of this year and the next 2 years. That's about 185,000. Yeah, right now we have we have a TOA over both schools, right? They split he or she splits the time between the 2 schools. So through this, we're gonna get 1 at each school rather than dividing the efforts of 1 person. So it's I think Gretchen put it really well, restoring the TOAs that were removed due to lower numbers impacted by the pandemic. Yep. Well, I think we mentioned it a lot. We are asking a lot out of all of our teams, especially administration, as we work through the strategic planning and the remnants of this pandemic. There's just an extensive amount of work for everybody involved, including administration. You good?
Good.
All right. Communication manager. This is already an approved item within ESSER 2. We would ask that we continue this funding for the next 2 years, roughly $147,000. This is our focus on 2-way communication within the community and our district. It helps us meet and respond to needs of our students, our community, and our staff. And we believe that this is a value added throughout the district, and we look forward to continuing to refine that position and get more out of it. But we love what's happening right now. And I could talk more about that if you'd like.
I am curious, one of the, what has been something that's really stood out for you with this position?
So far,
Mhm.
the ability of the employee to organize events that I think the district's been part of for years, but never actually turned it out, right? And so already multiple events that we've kind of done on an annual basis made to look like it's the first time we did it, or the first time we really put a lot of effort into it. So you're seeing that you can take already established items and make them that much better, which it helps with the communication, helps with people to know about what our district is up to, and brings kind of everybody into like a community group.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed a difference since you put that
Yeah,
position.
if
on.
you follow us on Facebook, you'll see the
Absolutely.
school exposure is fantastic. She's actually tracking. There's, 4 different kinds of communication, impact, resource situation, all those kinds of things. And she's tracking for each campus, how much exposure they're getting. And if there's not enough in one campus, then she literally goes to the campus and it's almost like our own newspaper reporter.
Nice, yeah.
And she's,
Michelle works a lot with her. The two of them have done the 2 recent events that were
Yep.
spectacular.
and she's open. She's very open to continuing to grow. Like we said, we love what she's doing, but we want to see it, what it looks like next year and the year after that.
Okay.
Cruising. Okay, ESER 3 HR administrative assistant. Instead of using the words, COVID assistant, essentially, it's the additional administrative assistant within the HR department for the next 2 years. It's already approved in ESER 2. That's why this first half year is not asked for. The position helps the district maintain its commitment to staff wellness, as the position is primarily responsible for COVID contact tracing, communication of policy, and organization and application of COVID leave. That was a weight our HR department was living under, and this position alleviates that and frees them up for the real work they need to do. Yeah, because it's already funded in your ESER 2. Oh, potentially. That could be a typo. I may have it all in ESER 3. Our new $90,000 admin assistant. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I could have made a typo there and included 3 years of money instead of the 2. I'll look at that. Sorry about that. Any questions about the strategy associated with the position?
No,
Okay,
Makes sense.
good. Okay, now we move out to the schools. This is administrative assistant, extra days. These are for the admin assistants who aren't on a 12-month calendar already. So basically the K through 8 schools. So we're asking for 8 extra days. It's 10 FTE, 8 days of compensation comes to 42,000 over the 3 years. Gretchen? Oh, I thought you said something, sorry. Essentially the amount of time devoted by admin assistants to keep up with new students, new staff, 6 students, 6 staff, and everything in between brought forth the need to increase the amount of work days available to these assistants. And that's why it's in there. It's to address what's going on in our district right now without overwhelming them too much.
so it allows them to come a few days early or stay a few days late.
Yep.
And it says available because we won't make them. If they've signed a contract for a certain number of days and they feel like they've got everything complete and balanced, we won't require them to come. But if their principal says, we're buried, there's a lot to do, we could use the extra days that's available. And that'll be the same on the administrative thing, I think, that you're going to do next. We kind of went on the big end, what's the most that might be needed?
Yeah.
And then as people see the need or not, then that'll adjust the spending.
Right. You guys have enough experience with me that I'm going to budget for the max and then start whittling that away through revisions in the future. So
Right.
otherwise, for why they're there, you guys are happy with?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so ESER 3 extra days for administrators and the same,
School.
oh, I'm sorry, school administrators.
Yeah.
I'm not on this list. I don't know where you find the days, the 8 days, 8 additional days for admin teams at each district school for 3 years. It's 27 FTE, 8 days of compensation and benefits, 3 years. And it's about $348,000. Again, as the district continues to work through the pandemic while also working on implementing the different levels of its strategic plan, much is and will be asked of our district administration teams. This item allows our administration teams to extend their work year and be compensated for their time.
Yeah, school administration teams.
Only school administration teams. Yes, I'm sorry. Again, I think we would be completely blown away if all of that money was spent on that, but again, we have to budget for the max. So that is a maximum amount if every single one did the 8 extra days for 3 straight years. Any questions?
Well,
All right. Custodians, COVID custodians. This is an ESSER 2 already, so we want to extend it through ESSER 3 for the next 2 years. It's 11 COVID custodians across district schools, for the next 2 years, roughly $850,000. Currently, that's set to be paid out of our payroll department. Centered on staff and student well-being. It's been part of our COVID strategy since the pandemic started. The idea is that we have COVID custodians dedicated solely to cleaning and disinfecting our buildings to increase safety of staff and students without overwhelming our current custodial staff. We ask to keep this through ESSER 3 at a minimum. We good? Okay. Dedicated substitute teachers. We continue to face a sub shortage and have difficulty hiring them. Where we have seen an ability to retain some of them is when we've given them a position for the entire year to work at a specific school. Our principals are aligned with this strategy and have expressed that they agree that it helps keep subs ready to go and it helps retain subs as well. So we asked for 2 dedicated subs at each of our schools. It's about 23 FTEs and $1.5 million over the course of 2 years is what we can expect to spend in that area.
I would assume that ADE has taken away any type of restrictions that have been there in the past that would keep you from doing what you want to do.
The sub requirements are still the same, but they still have to go through that emergency cert. They don't have to have a bachelor's. They can be working towards. So we do also have the ability to have paras, but they cannot be the dedicated long-term sub. So we could do a short-term. So they've eased up those restrictions, but they still have
They still
guides
have some-
to make sure that they're still safe and effective for students at school.
Okay.
And the nice thing about this, well, most schools need both subs every day. So most days they would be working. But on a day that they wouldn't, they would join that attendance behavior coach team and push into classes and help with small group instruction or reading or tutoring. So they will never just be on standby. They'll either be assigned to a class as a sub or assigned to a class as someone to work alongside kids.
Okay. And we're going to move into training. This next thing is for instructional classified training. We're asking for over a year and a half for the compensation for 152 classified staff members to train about 40 hours. Excuse me. Yep, 47 hours for 152 classified staff, instructional staff, people in the classrooms to train them on the strategies, the new implementations, things we're putting into their schools, because we've learned that we all have to speak that language of education if we want all of us to be moving in that a certain direction. So that's where the training for classified staff comes in. And Gretchen, you could speak more if I'm missing it.
You got it perfectly.
Okay.
We've heard in our focus group interviews and our conversations with classified staff, and after having a couple of trainings, how beneficial it is to be able to speak the same language as the teacher in the room and be on the same page. And their hours are always assigned in such a way that they don't have any before or after time for training. So we're adding it in.
So this would be required training.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. This definitely came out of part of it came out of meet and confer and discussions directly with classified instructional staff, asking for more information and ways to do their jobs better. Okay, Teacher Summer Academy. Right, every year we bring all of our new teachers in. We implement a bunch of new strategies, and our teachers come to school and we hit them with it. Well, under this, we ask to free up some money to get them in during the summer and let them learn and do some PD and get paid for it so that one, things aren't as much of a surprise. Two, we get more buy-in. And three, we're not asking them to give us their time for free. And it fits in conjunction with the classified.
Good deal.
Okay. Nurse, extra days. We've been doing that forever. Just in this year, we asked to fund it out of ESSER 3. It would be for the next 2 years. The current year, it's funded out of ESSER 2. This used to be something schools would see in their own budgets. When the pandemic kicked in, we took that out of school budgets and started handling it at the district level. And I think it would potentially stay there moving forward after ESSER is done as well. But just like admin assistants and anybody in the offices at our schools, nurses' level of work needed at the beginning of year and during breaks has increased substantially.
Makes sense.
Okay, 42,000.
Just out of curiosity, it's a little out of
Sorry about that.
context here, but as far as nurses go, how's that working for us? Do we have nurses at all of our schools? I mean, in the past, we tried to, but it was really hard to find actual certified nurses.
Yeah, we have health attendants with a variety of qualifications. We don't, same thing
Yeah.
as before.
Just because of the shortages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see in the, I said district health staff in the narratives. I should have probably changed that to health staff extra days instead of nurse extra days. Because you're right. I think, what, do we have 1 or 2
Mhm.
registered
We have a
nurses?
district RN, Manzanita has an RN.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wallapai, I think, a couple of the schools, and then others have health attendants. And then the district RN gets around to all those schools to provide support like we've done before for the health attendants that aren't fully credentialed.
Okay, thanks.
This is a request for 5 district level speech paraeducators for the second half of the current year and for the next 2 years. 5 FTE compensation and benefits for 2.5 years, $625,000.
The need for this, just to explain, because we struggle in staffing our own speech and language pathologists certified and credentialed. We find ourselves in the position of needing teletherapy, so we hire distance pathologists. Well, if your provider is in Phoenix, let's say, providing speech services via the computer, somebody has to be in that room with those kiddos. And so that would be this. Our special education assistant staff have been kind of juggling both balls, the special education assistant to the resource and self-contained classes, and then they're running over and trying to supervise the classes where students are receiving teleservices. So this takes a little bit of weight off of them during this reduce the learning gap period to focus on the academics with the kids in the resource programs. And then our speech students will have somebody with them that's qualified.
The next is the student information specialist. If I was smart, I would have kept that with the attendance. However, it is not part of the 20% set aside. This is already within ESSER 2 and approved by the board. We ask to fund it for the next 2 years as well. 1 FTE compensation and benefits, 2 years, 168,136. You got to remember, benefits counts as well. This fits into equitable access to education, as well as student well-being, and works in partnership with attendance clerks, interventionists, and officers to address chronic absenteeism, dropout rates, provide district training, and carry forward district attendance strategies.
So you mentioned it should have been in with, or it could have been in with the 20%. Is it something that you may want to adjust before we approve it, or?
No, because we meet that 20%. What I meant is I should have kept this in the area of the presentation that was associated with attendance. It's not something that we're associating with the 20%.
Okay.
Okay, this is new in this item, this classified recruitment stipends. will need to have board approval at a meeting. So the request is to provide limited recruitment stipends to new employees across 3 classified groups during the second half of this year and for the next 2 years. Those classifications, and it's limited, that's why I put the numbers, would be 20 drivers, 20 paras, and 20 para 4s and 20 para 2s. We have a shortage in all 3 of those areas. In at least 2 of those areas, the conversation is sometimes focused on them not being paid enough.
Mhm.
The district does not necessarily have the capacity to raise those paras' actual salaries currently, especially in conjunction with minimum wage in January, as well as the rest of our classified people. But we are aware that there is a shortage of these employees. So we're suggesting an actual recruitment stipend, similar to the critical needs stipend that we have for 4 teaching categories. We say, let's do it for 3 classified categories. And essentially, if you're hired, let's say in January as a driver, that $500 hiring bonus would go into your check, not the full amount. It would pay over the time that the rest of your contract. So if that person leaves a month later, they're not going to take that whole 500 with them. But if they stay for their time with us, then they're going to receive that $500 in compensation. And it would work the same in the year after at $1,000, and the year after that at $1,000 as well. We could see some pushback from the employees that are with us, but we have invested in multiple years in the compensation of those employees, and we will continue to do so. We want to use this money to address this specific issue. So
I've seen that with other companies around town where they've got the big signs, join us, $1,000 recruitment bonus or
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah, it's happening all over.
is there anything you guys would like to talk about that?
So if they got $500, the $500 would be divided into 6 payments, 1 each month or something like that?
Yeah,
Is
I
that what you're saying?
would tie it directly to their paychecks. So let's say they have 15 checks left for the rest of the year, then that 500 would split up on those 15
Oh,
checks.
15, gotcha.
It's essentially a raise in the given year for the employee. So we bring you in at this rate plus 500 for your time this year, and then 1,000 in the next year. But that's not a returning stipend. You can only get it when you're hired, and you could not get hired, get it, quit, and come back. It'd be a one-time thing, one-time payout for people.
Okay.
And it'd be something we need to bring directly to a board meeting again. Okay. COVID retention stipend. So this is for the rest of our employees. So ESSER does allow for retention stipends. It does not allow for bonuses or raises. And so for people who make it through a pandemic year, as we did the year prior, we would base that, and then we would base our payment on that. So if you made it through the entire year, you're coming back that next year, you get that $500 COVID stipend. That would be at the end of this year. And then the next year, we would drop that to 250. Those numbers can change based on what's available to us. Last year, when we did the COVID stipend, we did it when we realized we have this much money left in our grant. Let's do it. And we brought it forth and you guys agreed. So that amount can change based on what the district wants to spend. But based on our meeting thus far, you see we have a lot of cost objectives. So we don't expect to have a lot of money left over for retention stipends, but we think it's a big deal to move forward with during this pandemic.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, so now we are out of people for the most part, and we're just going to get into items. So this really holding line of our budget, the potential Palo Christi remodel, 3 million. Of course, this item, if not fully expended, would be reallocated to different areas. If we don't move forward with anything with Palo, it'd be reallocated to different areas. But if we want to do something with Palo, we got to put it in right now so that we have a spot to work out of. So that's why it's there right now. And you can speak about it right now if you'd like, or I can move to the next item.
So we're planning on Do we have a specific what we're thinking about with that 3 million?
Yes.
Or is this what we've already talked about?
Yeah, we had a very preliminary conversation before our facilities manager left. That in conjunction with the study that Mr. Jex did, when we looked at Palo before, it would be HVAC,
Mhm.
a little bit of asbestos, but we had a study that kind of reduced that need. A little bit on roofing. What was the other major one, Aaron?
Some ADA compliance.
ADA
potentially.
compliance, yeah. Basic things to get the main building in code.
Upgrade of our school marquees district-wide, 500,000. If we're gonna commit to communication, we should probably have nice tools that work to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one there. There are some that are in pretty bad shape and.
Some don't have one at all.
Yeah.
And
To
we
be able to have some funds to do something about it is great.
we did get strategic. Every school would have a digital marquee. So situational or emergency information could be displayed alongside one calls and other communications. And then on some of the schools that are on major thoroughfares with a lot of traffic, kind of upgraded those a little bit because we could do district videos and information alongside the
Mhm.
school.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Classroom furniture, as a board, we've been spending roughly 15,000 a year on classroom furniture. That's not necessarily going to cut it. That was a Band-Aid on a wound. And so here we want to, invest over 100,000 into classroom furniture in our district to get things up to par. Next, you see those opportunity room supplies. We've already talked about the interveners and remodeling our ISS rooms. Can't call it an opportunity room without opportunities. And so we want to invest some money into that.
Like computers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We have Serbat school started what's called the Rams Reflection Room, which is really a model of where we're headed. And there are zones. There's an area where there's computers. There's an area where there's some sensory materials available, quiet, audio, headphones, all of the things that go along with whatever needs might arrive in the room.
Vape detector systems at middle schools and high schools. This is a real preliminary budget amount. It's the best we could do on the limited information we had. There is a need out there and there is definitely a want among our principals to get these systems in. So we would ask to move forward with these through ESSER 3. Mid-state loan payment in 2023. That's our energy management. ESSER allows us to make these payments because our fixes were so focused on creating healthy environments for our students and staff that we were able to get these approved. By spending it out of ESSER 3, that frees it up in our own funds. Now, those funds are supposed to be used for loan payments. So we would, of course, continue to put it in the kitty, so to speak, but it would also free up money for immediate needs should we have any. And without having to, where are we going to find this? We could go directly into it because according to our loan payments, and our savings schedule, that 525,000 right there also elicited 525,000 worth of savings in that given year. And you're not using that savings to make the payment. Thus, it all fits into our budget, right? It really gives us the, I can't find the word. Yeah,
Flexibility.
thank you. Yeah, flexibility and latitude. Love it.
Right.
School business leave during 23 and 24. This is to pay for us covering people getting lab confirmed COVID positive tests. We're paying up to 2 full weeks based on their contract. This will let us offset some of that spending and put it into ESSER. Ultimately saves the district money.
Mhm.
Yeah.
IT related needs, 100,000. These haven't been fully fleshed out, but we know we are still working on one Chromebook per every student. And the day we get there, we'll have to switch to now replacing a quarter of those Chromebooks. So we'll never actually end that mission. It'll always be Chromebooks for students. Master scheduling program for 23 and 24. This is a maximum cost to purchase scheduling software that communicates directly with Synergy and is user-friendly and efficient. Continuance of COVID supplies in 23 and 24. We're really kind of not spending very much money in that area, but I always am concerned of setting that to zero should something happen and we need to get new supplies to keep our schools safe. And lastly, dyslexia designee for 22 and 23. These are training costs associated with new qualifications coming down from ARS that require a dyslexia training designee at each school serving kindergarten through 3rd grade.
That's gonna help with some of the gap.
Yes.
So I'm curious too, with COVID supplies, I mean, in that off chance that we get required as a district to actually test
Yeah.
all the time,
Yep.
that's gonna be money.
Yeah, that budget would change.
Yeah.
If we were mandated to test students and staff, that budget would not be 75,000. It'd be closer to $1 million.
Yeah.
It's
Right, and
quite
if you're-
expensive
If you're
for the test.
watching, Angela watches it daily, if you're watching what's happening with OSHA and the requirement of vaccinations and so on and so forth, we will find ourselves with a need to test.
Yeah.
That would change costs a lot.
Right.
We would have to adjust a lot of things, but thankfully, a lot of these, again, are maximums, and you've worked with me for years, you know that we would use actuals and the difference between the budgeted amounts to deal with any sort of issues that came up like that.
Right. But that's the point, though, is having it in the, as a line item, you can
Absolutely,
change. right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
Very good, yeah.
Can I make a comment? Aaron,
absolutely.
you have been so good with this stuff. It's like I come in and I'm like, I don't need to prep for anything. I know exactly what's going on because you got it right there in front of me, and I thank you.
You're welcome. This time it definitely was not me. It was Michelle, my grants manager. It was Shelley, our federal programs director, and it was Gretchen from the top. And also with our strategic plan, it's basically every single director, every principal across the board. So don't thank me this time.
Share the wealth.
It
Good team effort.
was a very good team effort.
Good.
So at this point, if there's any public comment or you guys have any more questions, that's where we are. If you have guidance where you want us to shift money, there's that. Otherwise, we would move forward on submission and I'd bring back specific items to the December board meeting.
I have a question, not suggesting to shift money, but
Mhm.
more curiosity as to where we are. When we look at our guard force that we use, KPD, don't know that we're doing anything with the Mojave as far as support goes on student safety. But where are we with all of that? Or as far as this district is concerned, do we have the presence that we want to have at each one of the schools with a combination of those forces that are available?
We continue a great relationship with the security company. Aaron is a really wonderful liaison with them, and we have at least one, if not two, all campuses, and we have experienced few to no staffing issues with them. So I think the presence is there, and they are working well with their administrators. We do work with KPD, for example. Lee Williams recently collaborated with them for some extra officers during a football game when they had a tip there could be a problem. We are working with Mojave County Sheriff's Office. We have Richard Prather, who Michelle manages that grant between Black Mountain and Kingman High. And the MCSO has been really good in working with Prather. So I feel like our presence is there and it's at a good level.
Good, thanks.
Did you know we have somebody like every night we have a patrol that
Yeah.
checks all of our doors. We continue to
really?
add to
Well, that's good.
safety.
We actually, thank you, Aaron, for remembering that. You can explain how it works. We were, you know how you have inconsistent phone answering.
Yes.
If an alarm would go off in the middle of the night, they might go through 1, 2, 3, 4 people before they find someone to answer. Where Aaron negotiated a contract, he and Devin, where every night, every campus is patrolled. And they
that is-
take the security
That
calls.
is wonderful.
Good.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, they're very
job.
helpful.
Thank you, Aaron. Forgot about that.
Sorry.
He gets that. Thank you, Beth.
I'll take that.
I do have another question. All of the things, I'm really impressed with the comprehensiveness of this, all of these items. But what is hitting me is that there's not an item for, unless I'm missing it, that's what I'm asking, for textbook or material, written material for classrooms. And for this assistance for helping me, fill these gaps.
Michelle.
I can go ahead and speak to that. So because this is a federal grant, curriculum is not something that we would be allowed to use. So even in the wake of lesser supplanting rules, that is one that because we need curriculum to run the schools, it's absolutely mandatory. We would have to use other funds because this would all need to be supplemental.
But what we've done is you'll see there's the training.
Uh-huh,
So we have the certified training, the classified training to support the curriculum,
right,
as well as all the added, the paras, the different positions that we have as well in support of the curriculum. So our district can take on that portion, but we're doing all the training and support.
Right.
okay. I
And
was
then-
thinking about supplemental materials that actually for the students who are in these learning gaps and they have something different from what the regular classroom has.
We could see that come up in other grants as well, or again, it would be something we change a little direction here and add some supplies.
Like the dyslexia.
Right. And then Aaron, talks about if he makes a loan budget payment out of this, or we pay our
Right.
dyslexia designee out of this, then those same dollars are now available in the M&O fund.
Right, right.
Yeah, we're not trying to get out of paying for anything as the
No,
judge, right?
I'm impressed with the comprehensive
Yeah.
look at all of this. All these things are so needed and they get overlooked so often.
I guess what I'm saying is, don't forget or just keep in mind that we still operate the district from the general fund perspective, right? And that's our 50 to 70 million going into these very same strategies, right? Now, that's what I think we're all really in agreement about, is how lined up we are here.
Yeah.
So,
We also have so many other state and federal grants, like with the dyslexia, we have the move on when reading. So there's other grants that work within this, that we call them grading them,
Mhm.
where they can come together and support. So if specific needs come up, we can address it by site or as a.
That's great.
I would say, Beth, what I'm so excited about, and you're hearing it, I feel like a proud mama.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't matter who you speak to, you're going to get the same answer, because we have literally worked through this plan and aligned it and talked about it, and just anybody that suggests any dollar amount has to justify it, align it with need and evidence. And the principals have vetted every single thing on the list with their teams and their staffs.
That's awesome. Well-oiled machine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep. And thanks to everybody who may be hearing this later on. It's good.
did you want to ask for any public comment or?
Sure. Yeah, what that we have here. We,
If anybody that's in the audience wanted to ask any questions at this time, we're happy to take them.
Addressing the outsourcing,
That's tomorrow.
addressing the outsourcing, that's going to happen, that might happen.
Not at this meeting. No, this is strictly a public meeting related to these ESSER funds. With the regular board meeting tomorrow night, we'll have an item related to what you're talking about. Yep.
What time?
4:30. Is there any comments on the stream or anything like that?
anybody else have any comments for the public meeting? Okay, hearing none. Are we adjourned?
We all done?
However you do it, yeah.
One motion to adjourn?
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned.